There are people that absolutely believe that human beings should not be here. Their philosophy in life is that human beings are a scourge on the earth and that we're not part of the natural systems. But then there are a group of folks that just don't understand trapping and hunting at all.
Most of them will take the time to listen and see both sides of it. But you always have a few that have already made their mind up and they ain't gonna change anyway.
They're looking at those clickbait things. They're looking at that has 1 million likes and views and however many comments. In their perspective, that's what the majority of people are believing in, when the reality of that post or whatever it may be is that it's clickbait.
They'll utilize photos from another state and make it look like it's here in Vermont.
I think there are some people who do want to just protect wildlife. We want to protect wildlife. We all want to protect wildlife. But if you're taking that from an uneducated perspective, then you don't really know how to protect wildlife until you speak to the scientists and you speak to the experts.
There's a huge lack of understanding, and people are polarized on everything. Like, you can't do anything without someone having an opinion on it. I'm willing to hear someone out, and if they don't agree, we shake hands and say, we don't agree.
The difficulty of being a scientist and reporting on science is that you can't make stuff up, and you can't just tell a fib to get your point across. Whereas the anti-community, they just lie.
They're creating a false narrative in order to try to convince people how they feel. Unfortunately, sometimes that does make it all the way to legislation, and they're allowed to play dirty like that.
Through social media and other means, the credibility of the individuals in the department and the credibility of the department as a whole has been undermined.
They are constantly bombarding the Fish and Wildlife Department and just eating up a lot of their money and manpower. It's for no good reason other than just harassment, to cause trouble to the department.
They search the internet for the worst of the worst of the worst outcomes that have been captured on video somewhere. And then they put that forth as the norm.
I've always been open to listening to people, but what bothers me is when people use misinformation and vicious, hateful tactics.
The Fish and Wildlife Department were professionally trained. Most had Masters of Science degrees. Some are hired as PhDs, and legislature would listen to these other people who would twist the facts around.
When we see plagiarism of a body of work that's designed to educate, and not just plagiarism, but plagiarism and perversion of it, that's a really difficult thing to justify supporting.
They're not using the facts. They're not using the right context. They're spewing misinformation to the public.
That's not an appropriate way to conduct business, and you don't see that from the outdoor community. You only see it from one side of this discussion.
All of us have to play by the rules, and then they're able to just go absolutely rogue, say whatever they want to say, do whatever they want to do, and we're speaking on science, facts, and experience, and they have none of those to back up what they're trying to say.
They'll use the same story over and over and over about a dog getting caught in a trap, even though we know that it's very rare. In almost every instance where a dog has been killed in a trap, it's been done by an illegal set. The person had broken the Vermont law that's done that, but they won't listen to that. The anti-people who don't like trapping or hunting would not listen to the facts.
You can find anything you want on social media. Any bad thing you want, whether it's cutting down a tree from a ladder, whether it's the worst case of an animal being mistreated in a trap, whether it's somebody mistreating their own children. It's all available on the internet, but that is not an accurate representation of how we raise children, how we cut trees down, or how we trap animals.
Without facts and information, you cannot take away legitimate activities that Vermonters have been doing for decades and are still doing that are healthy for this state.
Some of those folks didn't want anything killed or anyone disturbing wildlife until it impacted them.
These people are not interested in wildlife abundance. They're interested in stopping and destroying wildlife management.
When you see a social media post from one of these advocacy groups that has a picture of a man and his dogs and his children, and the caption is, photograph them and shame them wherever possible.
When I used to have to work from home from COVID, and some of them would call me. My kids who were older, you know, they were in high school or college, they couldn't believe how they would treat me on the phone, talking to me. Total disrespect.
My son, he asked me, he wanted to learn to trap. Took my son down, we set some traps, we talked about, you know, how, the why. We pulled out a 63-pound beaver. I snapped a picture. A lot of my friends and family, you know, would appreciate and embrace and understand what this means. And I posted that picture on Facebook. This organization, they sent out an email to their followers, like, to attack me for that whole week on my Facebook page and my personal stuff, and even associated with my business, threatening that, you know, I should put my son's head in that trap. And they were threatening to call DCF on me because they claimed, and I quote, that I was mentally abusing my child by subjecting him to the cruel and brutal mutilation of a game animal. I was seriously and maliciously attacked.
I don't know what kind of fear or hate motivates people to take a stance that is so single-minded and tunnel-visioned.
I don't deserve to go through this, all because I went down to the Girl Scout camp and helped them get rid of a beaver that was plugging the spillway.
One of the really major bills last year was this attempt to change the Fish and Wildlife Board. And we have a system right now that functions incredibly well.
The bill that they introduced would have made non-consumptive users in charge of what happens to the wildlife in Vermont. That would be detrimental to the health and the populations of the wildlife here in Vermont.
You're not going to have someone who's against development on a board that's you know, in charge of architecture, for example.
It was scary, and for someone whose lifestyle depends on this, it's not something to joke around about. I mean, we've seen, you know, we saw grown men with tears in their eyes over the potential of losing that.
People came together, people showed up. This room was completely packed on 2 separate occasions.
There's nothing wrong with having people out there on the land, connecting to the land in the way that motivates them to conserve it. As long as it doesn't impact your ability to know that the wildlife is out there, your ability to see it, then they should have a right to continue to do it.
What we'd like people to do is meet us partway too, you know, and try to understand what it is we do out here. I don't expect that they'll always like it. Some people will never want to kill anything themselves, and that's okay too, you know, because it's a big responsibility. It's a big responsibility.